Thank you, Rosemary. You introduced me, so I think you will get used to my Irish accent when I finish it. I'm wondering how you found the session so far, especially this morning, because as a person, as myself, I enjoy such conversation a lot. That's also true that when I study here for 2 years. But at the same time, I feel a little bit distant because that's too far from my context. And I'm not going to use a PowerPoint today, so I'm just to show you some stories that help you understand what has been in my context. So I will start with a story. So there's a middle-aged lady who was believed to have a mental health condition, and her parents divorced maybe many years ago, and she had been living with her father. And her father passed away in 2011, and left a will that her father's apartment did not go to Our Lady, but her cousin. And in return, her cousin have to make sure that Our Lady can continue living in the apartment. It's like, I leave you something and you take my child. Something like that, even though it's a middle-aged lady. And it's a very big but. Only 2 days after her father's death, and the cousin sent Our Lady to a mental hospital for whatever reason. So, and the only proof of the so-called guardian, is like the will addressing the apartment. There's no legal proceeding happened. There's nothing, but the hospital somehow found it enough to accept the guardianship. So after Our Lady leaving the hospital for over 3 years, the hospital sued the lady, her cousin, and her sister, who have not been lived with Our Lady since the divorce. And because, first of all, the hospital finds the lady was recovered to live, but nobody picked her up. And the second, nobody is really paying. And leaving the hospital like 3 years cost about, 45,000 euros. But the house insurance cannot cover it all. So Our Lady still owns the hospital about 7,000 euros. So the hospital asked the court to rule, first, discharge the lady, and the second, please pay. And you may have a question here, why the hospital, just let the lady sigh herself out. The very possible answer is that hospital did not want to make a decision because, making decisions implies taking responsibilities if this goes wrong. So it's very likely, if this lady just hypothetically committed suicide after discharge and her family members did not agree this discharge, so the family members can challenge the hospital, say, it's not me let him out, it's your decision, you are going to pay. So family members could argue, you are the professionals. It's not for us to say whether she's okay to leave. You are the professionals, so you make the decision, you take the responsibilities. But if the court made a decision that Our Lady is free to go, it's a court decision. It's no longer the hospital decision. So the hospital is off the hook. Unsurprisingly, the cousin disagreed with the hospital and her sister that Our Lady is fine enough to go home, because he's taking the apartment, obviously. But the court was not willing to rule based on the president's medical evidence in this case. And however, they sent this case file to a medical agency whose job is to provide professional opinions over medical disputes. And several months later, I remember 3 months, the case was returned by the agency because whether she was recovered enough for discharge was beyond their business, beyond their scope of business. So it's like the hospital, they don't want to make the decision, so they sue. The court, they don't want to make decision, so they have an agency. And the agency, they just don't want to be the scapegoat. So that's what happened next. There actually where magic happens because the hospital withdraw their claims that Our Lady should be discharged. And they only asked, just pay. And the court just ruled, okay, you have to pay. And nobody cares about this lady is out of the hospital or not. And because I found this case on a judgment openly available online, so I have no other information to know why the hospital decided to withdraw. But as a Chinese, we can understand it must be the court, pressure a little bit. But it's off the record. It's just myself. And the hospital just withdraw this claim. And then how much they pay or how they pay, because there's the issue of this case, but it's not a concern of our topic today. But it is our concern that, as a matter of fact, the voices of Our Lady have zero visibility in the whole judgment. It's a quite a long judgment, like 5 or 6 pages, but there's no mention, not single mention about what the lady wants or what his needs, or her needs, sorry. So it's like we are discussing about best interest or the will and preference. We don't have, they have never been on our table yet. So we don't care about whether it's best interest, or we don't care it's a will preference. We just, what I call avoiding this responsibility. So in fact, we can ask more questions about this story. It's a very reasonable questions like, will this case result differently if we have better community-based services? Probably yes. And it may also help if our mental health law have periodical and independent review for commitment. It's also true, and it's a big topic in mental health law theory. And another one is that should Our Lady pay for involuntary court services? So, but that they are very legitimate questions, but that's not why I choose this story. I choose this, first of all, for you, for the audience today. You don't have to know anything about the Chinese mental health law, but you can say something is not going right. Something is going wrong. And think of this. This case is a real case, happened in 2014, like 6 years after China ratified the CRPD. And happened in the capital city, which is the most economically and politically advanced city in China. In that year, we even have our Olympic Games. So this case happened 6 years after all of these events. But more importantly, I thought about this case because I think it represents the very important keyword to understand the whole business is like, as I said, responsibility avoiding. So, but yet, it's not whole picture. Responsibility avoiding is not whole picture here. Because if we say the story indicates that the potential responsibility pushes or motivates the hospital or the medical professionals to give more weight to the opinion of the family members. So we can also say denying their access to justice is like encouraging them or allowing them to continue their abuse. So let me tell you very briefly. So if people with psychosocial disabilities, there's no any sort of the tribunal for involuntary commitment currently in China. So the psychiatrists, although we have a sort of the dangerous standards, but psychiatrists, they don't have to persuade anybody with any evidence. So they are totally their say, and in consortium with the family members. So for those people currently under the detention, if they are lucky enough that the hospital, allows them to get out of the hospital temporarily to sue the hospital themselves, even you are lucky enough to do that. And to my knowledge, there is only one case happening in China. And if I have a time, I will introduce after I finish my other story. And a man who detained for 14 years and sued the hospital for discharge, but the court says, no, your guardian, so-called guardian, have done nothing wrong, and it's a power or right to decide what's the best way to look after him. So even if you are discharged already, if you want to sue, if you found the commitment is wrong, and it's very likely that the court will not accept your case, because in many, I assume in many civil law system countries, they have a concept, something like a capacity to litigation. So the court will say, you are not capable of making your own case, so your family members who may probably be abusers in these cases should represent you in front of court. So if we deny people with psychosocial disabilities of all the access to justice to challenge the hospital, what can we expect from any respect for human rights we are talking about these days? So Charles says I should not use too many emotion words, but I choose this story because I'm really angry about this case. In some sense, we can say, if we have a court system like this, what's the point if we have any, law, or it's better or not? But remember, the first keywords we're talking about is avoiding responsibility. So I'm now talking about the second word is like, as I introduced the very important rule of access to justice. The second keyword is like making troubles. And Charles, again, he said it's a funny word in English and it's not clear. But I'm not a native speaker, so I'm fine with that. Making troubles, like if you cannot challenge them from the court or any other official proceedings. So for them, you can make zero trouble to the hospital. So on one hand, the family members, they can easily make troubles with the hospital. For example, they can go to court, they can comply with the government, and in some extreme cases, they can create very huge disturbance of the working order, so-called working order of the hospital, or even kill the doctors and the nurses. So on the other hand, if I volunteer rights of people with psychosocial disabilities, and nothing you can do about it. So if you happen to be a psychiatrist, what would you do? So that's a true story. So, as a Chinese citizen, it would be unwise to not say some positive things after that, especially on the camera. I don't know what the camera is still on. So as you may know, in many places in the world, human rights has advanced with a very dynamic and helpful interaction between the social movements on the ground and the landmark cases in the courtrooms. So, we have over about the courtrooms. So let's say about social movements. And there's a case happened to come to my attention is that a gay man was put to the, when his family members found he's a gay, and he was put in the mental hospital by her wife, so-called wife, and other family members. And as you may know, you may don't know, but I will tell you that in China, the DPO, or the Disabled People's Organization, working on psychosocial disabilities are at a very early stage, but they now exist. Though they can learn from the lessons from other, more well-developed social movements, like LGBT rights groups, and all of you know that they are more active and organized and powerful everywhere. So when this man was put in the hospital, and one of the activists happened to know this case, and they consulted about the NGO working on psychosocial disabilities for strategy and action plan for advice. And 3 days after their involvement, the man was get out of the hospital. And I'm not really sure, and I don't really think it's clever enough to tell how they did it right now, but they succeed in something like this. So that's, again, prove my points about it all depends on how you can make trouble to the hospitals. So that's, still, I think to conclude with the help of these two cases, I talked about two keywords in understanding the business in China. One is the responsibility avoiding, and the second is troublemaking. So I hope it interests you in some way, but there's still room for more critical thinking to myself, because you may find the stars very interesting, but I make a legitimate contribution to this panel, besides the gender balance or my Irish accent. I'm not sure, because is that just a common sense to you, to many of the Westerners, or am I just adding a footnote to the very famous legal phrase, like if there's no remedy, there's no right? What am I talking about? It may be just a very common sense to you, but I do want to use my presentation as a reminder that I believe that maybe many of our delegates today are working in environments that the common sense to Westerners are far from reality. So we may share some topics as like, the support, community living in this room, but that's why I show this picture to you. We may share something beyond the surface, but we have our own problems under the surface. Is that right, under the surface? Yeah, under the surface. So that's what I'm trying to do on my presentation. Thank you very much.